My name is Sister Maria Dominica. I am 56 and have lived most of my life within the walls of the monastery of St. Agatha in Umbria. Majestic cypress trees, chirping swifts, and the smell of old pages were all I needed. There, in shadow and prayer, I hoped to find the one called light. But no one told me that sometimes the light is blinding. It happened in August, when there is a sultry silence in Italy, and it seems that time itself is frozen between the blows of church bells. I went up to the bell tower to replace the candles at the statue of the Archangel Michael. And suddenly, failure. No, not physical. Something broke not in my legs, but in reality. I felt as if I'd been yanked off the hook of my normal life. Everything went dark. But it wasn't dark. There was a white, scorched nothingness. And there's a voice in it. You believed in walls. I'll show you what's behind them. I was led as if through a veil. I was standing in a huge hall built of symbols, not stone. The stained glass windows depicted scenes I didn't recognize, popes crowning strange figures, women in black veils holding babies with inverted crosses on their foreheads, and in the center, a throne. But Christ was not sitting on it. On the throne sat a man in a golden robe, whose tiara was engraved with the words in Latin, Vicarius Filii Tenebrarum. I didn't know that title. I studied church history, I knew all the popes, and yet here was someone called Leo XIV. You've never heard of me, sister. And this is their victory. His face wasn't made of flesh, it was changing. Sometimes a young man, sometimes an old man, sometimes a woman. He spoke in a voice that had too many voices in it. His eyes were as empty as the tombs of emperors. I was not chosen by God, but by those who thought they could rewrite the sky. I ascended the throne to destroy it. And I almost succeeded. I was trembling. Not out of fear, but out of impossibility. It was too true to be a lie, and too terrible to be true. They hid my name. They removed him from the list. But memory doesn't belong to people. It lives in those who die, and come back. I screamed. At that moment, I woke up in my cell, on the floor, among the fragments of a glass lamp. The doctors said I had a stroke. The priest said I just needed more rest. And the abbess asked me to forget it. But I can't. Everything I once thought was sacred is now bursting at the seams. Who was this Leo XIV? Why doesn't it exist in the Vatican annals? Why does my heart know his name, but my mind refuses to understand? I've been hearing a voice in the void every night since then. Whatever you find out, you're a witness now. And the witnesses do not return to silence. I do not know what will happen next. But I know one thing, the prayer no longer sounds the same. Because sometimes, if you listen too deeply, a different voice comes out from under the words, Our Father. And he calls my name. After that revelation, sleep became impossible. I lay at night listening to the old wooden walls of the monastery crackle in the dark, as if whispering to each other. I couldn't pray. The words of Pater Noster stuck in my throat, as if the prayer itself knew that it could no longer be said without a lie. On the third day, I made up my mind. After leaving the monastery, for the first time in years, I went to Perugia. There, in the basement of the oldest theological library, there was an archive, the existence of which was known only to initiates. I came here on the pretext of preparing a paper on the history of the papacy in the Counter-Reformation era. Leo XIV? The librarian repeated with surprise when I asked about Leo XIV. Ma sir, il n'existe pas. Vous voulez dire Léon XIII, peut-être? No, I said. The 14th. He thought about it. Then, without a word, he led me to the farthest corner. There, in a wooden box under glass, was a manuscript that didn't even have a title on it. Just numbers, 1678 to 1681. When I touched it, it was like an electric shock. The paper was as old as the scrolls in the Judean desert, but the ink was fresh. It didn't talk about Dad directly, but about the gap. For 3 years, the papal throne was considered occupied, but not a single public speech, bull, or annuity was issued. Only the signature, strange, LVX instead of the name. Light? Or, a trick of the light? He was there. But no one should remember. Because what he brought cannot be called a teaching. It was an experience. Experience insanity. Then there were pages filled with different handwriting, as if many people were trying to describe the same thing. They wrote about the Pope, who was not human, about the liturgy, where the body of Christ was not eaten, but given back to him, about the night mass, where candles lit up from the bottom up. I wanted to close the book. But I couldn't. There was a drawing on the last page. Simple ink scheme. The throne, the eyes around it, the woman in the black veil with her mouth closed and under it the inscription. The witness is silent. But she shouldn't have seen it. My heart began to pound. It was me. Someone's already seen me, there. Before this happened. When I returned to the monastery, the walls seemed to recognize me. I walked through the corridors as if I were walking on someone else's body. The light from the lamps was too cold, and the sisters' faces were too calm. I began to notice something different. The icons seemed to look past me. The cross was not in my cell. I swear, it had hung there all my monastic existence, but now there was only a shadow on the wall. And at midnight, I heard the voice again. Now you know. But this is only the first layer. Dad wasn't alone. He is only the gateway. I didn't sleep a wink that night. The monastery, usually filled with peaceful silence, became a dark maze of shadows, in which every rustle seemed to be a harbinger of something unthinkable. The air was thick, as if filled with unseen presences, and I could feel the weight of an unknown fear filling my lungs with each breath. I sat on a bench in my cell, my hands crossed in my lap, and prayed, but the prayers turned into soft moans of the soul, into pleas that themselves undermined my faith. Each Ave Maria sounded like an echo in the void, and suddenly I heard it, almost in a whisper distort into words I couldn't understand. Marva. Mara. Names that were not in my memory, but all the more deeply embedded in my consciousness. It was a call from the depths, a call I couldn't turn away from. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the corner of the room where the dim candlelight barely touched the walls. Her appearance was hazy, as if blurred by fog, and she had no face, only a thin white veil covering her head. But it wasn't a threat, it was more of an invitation. Something inside me shifted, like a door that had been locked for a long time. I went over and touched the veil. The cold touched my fingers, but when I tried to look beyond it, there was a void, a black abyss coiled like the fabric of night. At that moment, the world around me crumbled like ashes, and I realized that I was no longer in the monastery. I was looking at a scene from an ancient dream, but it was too realistic to be a fantasy. It was a cross between a temple and a palace, built of light but cold, like frozen ice. The walls reflected the sky, which was gray and lifeless, and the domes seemed to press down from above, squeezing the chest and making it difficult to breathe. In this strange space, the symbols of the papacy, the keys, the tiara, and the pigeons were disfigured by time and something inhuman. The keys were rusted, the pigeons were turned into petrified figurines, and the tiara was covered with rough scales like a snake's. On the throne sat he, Pope Leo XIV. His face was translucent, as if carved from parchment, and his skin was fragile and thin, but his eyes burned with a cold fire. He didn't say a word, but I could feel his thoughts digging into my mind like invisible claws. I wasn't the first, I thought, but I was the one who opened the gate. Not by the power of faith, but by the power of doubt. Doubts that eat away at the heart like poison and undermine the foundations. I gave them a liturgy that reverses the truth. Every word, every sacrament now they do not lead to the light, but to this abyss. He raised his hand, and I saw the ring on his finger black, without a single stone, with a symbol that looked like an inverted omega, intertwined with the Latin letter M. This ring radiated a chill that passed through my flesh and left a frosty mark on my soul. Sister, he whispered without words, you bear this name on your heart, but it is not the name of God. Suddenly I found myself in my cell, drenched in a cold sweat. The walls were still the same, and the candle had burned out to the end, but there was a veil on the floor, thin, transparent, and eerie. I knew that I would return to the world of the living, but a crack opened up inside me that prayers couldn't close. When I came back from that shaky world between life and death, I felt like a prisoner of my own mind. Every step I took along the monastery corridors echoed with an unknown fear, and the silence became oppressive, as if it was squeezing the breath out of me. The walls, which had witnessed so many prayers and vows, now seemed to hide something sinister that was waiting for me in the dark. My sisters, still busy with the daily life of the monastery, did not notice the change in me. But I knew the experience had changed me. The doubts that Leo XIV imposed on me went deeper than I could have imagined. What if the faith I'd been touching since I was a child wasn't exactly the truth I was looking for? What if everything we were taught was part of a terrible lie? One evening, as I was sitting in my room, deep in prayer, the voice of Leo XIV spoke again in my head, like a cold wind that cuts through my bones. He spoke not in words, but in images, the darkened pages of sacred books, the wounded hands that wrote and read them, twisting the meaning with each letter. The government is a fraud, he whispered, and the one that calls itself the Church today has long since renounced the light. You must understand that not all shepherds lead their sheep to the light. Some lead them to oblivion. These thoughts tormented me, breaking the foundations that I had believed in all my life. I realized that there was no going back on my path. The knowledge I had gained required an answer. I began to search for ancient texts hidden in the monastery's library, gathering dust for centuries. There, among the parchments and books, I found manuscripts that spoke of the secrets of the papacy, of hidden rituals and ancient plots that no one dared to reveal. Among these pages, I read the dreaded symbols associated with the ring of Leo XIV, a sign that denotes power, but is also the key to the darkness that awakens the deepest fears of man. I realized that my own doubt was the enemy inside me that wanted to break me, but also the path to liberation. That night, I was on my knees, looking out the window at the stars, which seemed cold and alien. Lord, I prayed, give me the strength to go through this darkness without losing myself, without betraying you. The response didn't come in the form of words. Instead, the room was filled with a soft glow, as if invisible wings had touched me, giving me strength and guiding me. In that moment, I realized that true faith is not the absence of doubts, but the struggle against them, the eternal movement towards the light, despite all fears and trials. But my journey was only just begun. There was a battle ahead not only for my soul, but also for those who believed in the lie. After that night of light and doubt, I felt that I would never be able to see the world through the same eyes again. The monastery, which seemed to me sacred and impregnable, became the scene of an invisible struggle, a struggle between truth and deception, light and darkness. The ring of Leo XIV, that ominous symbol of power, now haunted me in every dream and wake. I felt that it was not just an ornament, but a key to some knowledge that had been hidden for centuries. Its engraving, an ancient sign barely visible in the light of day, became clear in the dark, as if it spoke to me in a language I had to decipher. One late night, when the monastery was completely silent, I decided to take the dangerous step of going underground, where a monk rarely set foot. The stairs down seemed to me like a stairway to the abyss, each step echoing in my heart with anxiety and fear. But the voice that whispered to me that the truth was waiting in the dark was too strong to back down. In the dimness of the dungeon, I found an ancient altar covered in dust and cobwebs. Yellowed manuscripts lay nearby, pages of which held the secrets of the papacy and its darkest secrets. There were records of rituals that no one was supposed to know, deals with the shadows, betraying the light for power. It was there that I heard the first voices, not human voices, but the voices of souls trapped in the ring. They were crying out for help, warning me of the danger that was coming. Their words were filled with pain and despair, like the echo of a curse forever bound to this symbol. As I walked back upstairs, I could feel the knowledge changing me. My whole life, my whole journey, now seemed to be part of a great mystery, a struggle in which there is no place for the weak and those who fear the truth. I realized that the ring is not just a symbol of power, but a tool manipulated by the forces of darkness to confuse and enslave souls. And only those who dare to face fear and accept their mission will be able to resist this ancient darkness. In the quiet of my monastery cell, I prayed again, not for peace, but for strength, strength to fight and not break, to be the light in this world where darkness rules. In the evening of the next day, when a thick and impenetrable mist fell over the monastery, a letter was brought to me. It was unsigned, on old, almost brittle paper, sealed with wax with the very sign of the lion's claw piercing the star. Its trembling texture seemed to retain the warmth of the fingers of the person who wrote it. The paper smelled of incense, but beneath the fragrance was another smell, ash, perhaps dust. I opened the letter with trembling hands. Sister Evelyn. You've learned too much. But that's not all. Come to the Temple of Oblivion. Don't bring anyone. Take the ring. It will open the gate. Ex tenebris lux. The words were written in black ink that seemed alive, glinting in the candlelight like an observer's pupil. Signed, Ex tenebris lux, out of darkness, light. This was the motto used by the old heretical orders, absorbed into the shadow even in the era of the Inquisition. But who would know about them now? I knew that if I went there, there would be no turning back. The Temple of Oblivion was located in the forest, outside the monastery grounds, on the ruins of an ancient monastery that was burned down during the Great Schism. It was covered in moss, roots, and a silence so deep that it seemed alive. The trees there leaned sideways, as if afraid to look at him. I walked through the ruins until I found a stone with a carved cross turned inside out, not upside down, as if the cross was hiding in itself. I put on my ring. The stone shook. The dust of my pent-up breath kicked up, and I saw the gate. Not a door, an archway with no space behind it, but something else, a void filled with voices. I went in. What I saw had no name. The space beyond the archway wasn't hell, nor was it heaven. It was a place between. God's memory space. Archive of souls. Names hung in the air, written in golden sparks. I didn't read them with my eyes, I heard them with my heart. And among these names, like a rotting note in a holy chorale, one sounded, Leo Quartus Decimus Leo XIV. The shadow of his soul hovered in this place like a fallen star. It wasn't cursed, it was locked up. Not in hell, but in the hall where souls are weighed. His mouth moved, but it didn't speak. Only in my mind it sounded. I'm not a dad. I was chosen, but not by heaven. And then I realized, he was a pawn. A different will was behind his ascension to the throne. Magic, not of the light, manipulated his election. His ring was the key not only to the physical gate, but to unlocking the lock of the human will. I returned to my cell in silence, the ring still on my finger. In the morning, I felt like it was all a dream. But there was a mark on the palm spot in the form of an inverted cross, surrounded by a ring. It wasn't a dream. And now I knew, I'm not just a witness. I am the bearer of truth. But the truth kills those who say it out loud. And yet, I felt like I'd stepped over the edge of not going back, and worst of all, I didn't feel afraid. After I left the Temple of Oblivion, the monastery began to feel strange to me. Its walls, once warm and prayerful, now felt cold, as if someone unseen was watching my every move. I began to hear sounds in the night, heavy breathing on the other side of the wall, footsteps moving in time with mine, whispers in Latin distorted as if someone was trying to remember a language forgotten for centuries. But the worst part started in the morning. On the altar, where no one had access except the Mother Superior, I found a stone. It was dark red, and it gave off the feeling of raw metal. The stone felt warm to the touch, as if it had just been taken out of a living creature's chest. It was carved with the figure of a lion standing on 4 flames. One of the tongues was black. Under it is the inscription, Sanguis Testis et Memoriae. The blood of a witness, and memory. That same night, I had a dream, not an ordinary one, not a dream, but a spiritual immersion. I stood in the great hall, the walls of which were made of glass, but the glass breathed, pulsed like skin. In the center of the hall was a throne, but not a mercy seat, it was a judgment seat. A lion was sitting on it. Not a beast, not a man, a symbol made of flesh. His mane ran down his shoulders in golden veins, but his eyes were as empty as coals that hadn't been hot in a long time. It was Leo XIV, not a man, but what was left of him in the world of ideas. He was looking at me. I couldn't speak. He couldn't stay silent. They wore my face like a mask. Spoke in my name. But the will that guided them was not of the light. Sister Evelyn, either you will speak the truth, or you will fall into silence. But know this. Silence is also selected. I woke up in tears, my palms burning. I looked at them and saw that they were both scratched, as if I'd been clutching a rock in my sleep. But the stone was still on the altar. Only now it's cracked. Light came from the crack, neither white nor golden. The color of truth, too pure to describe in words. Later, I found a folio in the monastery library that I hadn't noticed before. The cover was simple, but the inside pages were terrifying. It told of an ancient brotherhood called the Glass Witnesses. They believed that the real heresy was not blasphemy, but silence in the face of lies. Their mission is to bring the truth back to where it was replaced by symbols. Pope Leo XIV, according to these records, was the final prophet whose silence destroyed the sign. And now, to restore the balance, someone has to speak up. And I knew it would be me. But with each page, I felt like I was being watched. Not nuns. Not people. It's something ancient. And maybe it wasn't the first time someone had tried to uncover that truth, but maybe I was the first one to get to that point and not disappear yet. In the long-forgotten vaults of the monastery, I found a passage leading to the crypt under the old chapel. None of the sisters went there. The door was boarded up from the inside, as if someone was trying not to get out, but to stay. I didn't know what was driving me, but the feeling of remembering something that wasn't my own was becoming unbearable. The crypt was dry, as if the air had been there since the 13th century. On the stone walls, writing scratched with fingernails or a knife. It was Latin, but distorted, as if the language itself didn't want to be spoken. I ran my hand down the bottom line and felt the air thicken. A whisper came out of the wall. It didn't ring in my ears. It sounded inside the skull. Murus scribit. Murus meminit. The wall writes. The wall remembers. In the center of the room was an altar. Not marble, like in the temple, but bone. I didn't realize that right away. On top of it is an ancient volume covered in leather, almost fused to the dusty surface. Codex Murus, that's what it was called. A self-written book. There was no ink on its pages. Only when I put my hand on them did the words appear in the whiteness, and I realized that this book was writing my story while I was reading it. She came to the source. To see how the past sings. But the past is not a song. It's a call. I saw myself kneeling in the same room, surrounded by shadows. My mouth is open, but ash is leaking out. A figure in papal vestments stood behind me. But there was no face, a mirror instead. And then I realized, the mirror wasn't showing me. It showed everyone who knew but didn't say anything. Their souls were collected in the Codex Murus. Their memory didn't disappear, it became part of the wall. Their fault is silence. I closed the book. Everything was shaking. The light came from the stone, which was now in my pocket. It pulsed in unison with my heart. New words began to cover the wall, right before my eyes. Veritas Silas est. Truth is a crime. I didn't know what to look for next. But I felt that Leo XIV had once hidden something. And the dead continue to pay for his silence. And if I don't reveal this truth to others, Codex will also write down my name. When I came out of the crypt, my eyes didn't immediately see the light. The day seemed to have disappeared. Time became distorted, as if the monastery no longer belonged to the familiar reality. There wasn't a soul in the yard. No sisters, no bells, no birdsong. Only silence, broken only by a faint tinkling sound, as if someone was scratching the glass. I was walking down the corridor to my cell when I smelled incense, and something else. A smell that shouldn't have been familiar, but it was the dust of ancient leather, like Codex Murus. My room was dark. Only a single beam of light passed through the crack in the shutter, illuminating the center of the table. There was a mirror on it. Not mine. The frame is gold, decorated with an engraving with 7 closed eyes. There was no reflection of me on the glass. Instead, a face in a papal tiara, without eyes. They were replaced by tiny mirrors that moved. It was as if someone inside them was looking at different eras at the same time. I heard a voice. But not external. It sounded like an internal monologue that I hadn't started. You came too close. Codex doesn't like to be read. And he doesn't forgive those who bring up a dead memory. I recoiled. But the mirror wouldn't let go. The reflection pulsed, and I saw the Vatican in it. 13th century. Leo XIV standing in front of a hall filled with bishops. He was holding a black wand that had no shadow. He spoke without words, but his voice shattered stone and flesh. Let the wall record everything. But don't let anyone read it. Let the truth be a torment to those who vomit it up. And again the voice in my head. You don't see the past. You look in the shower mirror. It reflects the sin of the church. But only to those who can still be forgiven. I realized that Leo XIV had made a deal with someone whose name is not spoken in Catholic liturgies. He sealed the truth in symbols, in mirrors, in walls, to hide one moment, one secret that could destroy the very structure of faith. The mirror shook. And I saw myself aged, broken, silent. Codex recorded this version as well. I grabbed the mirror and smashed it on the floor. The fragments didn't fall apart. They were left hanging in the air, reflecting different versions of my future, each with a new form of fear. And then I heard, as if from under the ground. The wall will continue to write. But now you're writing a sequel to it. When dawn came, it took me a moment to realize that it wasn't real. The sun seemed to shine from inside the monastery, not from the sky. The light was too steady, too dispassionate. Everything looked like the scenery of an ancient theater. I was an actress without a role, without a script, but with the understanding that the final is close. I descended into the crypt again, driven not by logic, but by the need to finish what I had begun. Codex Murus was no longer hiding. It lay open on the stone altar, the pages flipping by themselves. The words on the pages were no longer Latin. It was a language that could not be read, only felt. Lines appeared on the last page as I watched. They were written in blood, and I knew it was my blood. Scriptum ultimum venit per in que saw the abyss. The last entry will come through the one that looked into the abyss. And then he appeared. Codex Keeper. It didn't walk, but appeared as if it was carved out of the darkness itself. His face was covered with a mask that looked like a mosaic of the Pope, but his eyes glowed from within, not with light, but with knowledge. His voice was unsteady, as if 1,000 different voices were trying to agree. You wanted to know. But knowledge is not light. This is fire. Whoever holds it should be the first to burn. He pointed to the page. There was a name on it, Leo Quartus Decimus Leo XIV. Suddenly, the walls of the crypt became transparent. I saw the past, the present, and possible futures, burned temples, silent crowds, angels with their wings cut off. But worst of all, the faces of millions, distorted in horror, in agony, screaming silently. Among them are saints, bishops, martyrs, children, and monks. They all held the same seal symbol. And they were all deceived. The guardian said. Leo XIV replaced light with order. He sold the truth for an eternal structure. He's not a beast. He is the architect of the cell. Now you know. And you're one of the few. The Codex is ablaze. But it didn't disappear. He disappeared into thin air and entered me. I felt the pages, his pages being written on my soul. The guardian was gone. That left me. I have been living in the abode of silence ever since. I rarely speak. But sometimes, especially on the days of eclipses, I hear the Codex whisper new chapters, as if the history of the Church is still going on, but no one dares to read it again. I am the last live page.